Welcome to the IT Career Energizer podcast. For anyone who wants to build and grow a career in IT, develop and improve your strengths and skills, be inspired and motivated by the successes of others, manage your career progression, and achieve your IT career goals. And now, your host, Phil Burgess.
Hi, Phil here, and welcome to episode 69 of the IT Career Energizer podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast, just visit itcareerenergizer.com. And now let's chat with today's featured guest, Ben Stopford. Ben is a software architect and engineer, currently working at Confluent on the Apache Kafka team. Ben has previously worked at RBS and Thoughtworks, as well as a few other financial institutions. So Ben, can I ask you to expand on that brief introduction and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
That's a pretty good intro. Done a few different roles in my kind of career, from software engineering, a bit of kind of management stuff, a bit of organizational stuff. Slightly unusually, in comparison with some of my contemporaries, I didn't study computer science. That's pretty unusual with most of the people I work with. I did a kind of master's afterwards, but I was originally studied physics and went into IT after that. And then, my career is pretty much split 50-50. So the first kind of decade was mostly kind of building business systems in sort of larger companies. And you mentioned Thoughtworks.
Yeah.
And then the second half was very much more around kind of data technologies, databases, data platforms, and then currently Kafka, which is a streaming platform.
Right. Okay. Ben, can you maybe tell us a unique career tip that the IT Career Energizer audience need to know and maybe don't?
I guess one of the ones that was less obvious to me, and bear in mind that I started my career 20 years ago, but probably the one that was the least obvious to me was I kind of assumed, certainly in the very hierarchical company that I entered, that to progress in my career meant that I should somehow become some kind of manager and then move my way up this kind of career ladder. That seems like a very natural way to kind of progress your career. And that actually does work. And it works very well if you're good at management, although management is actually kind of very multifaceted. But I think the interesting thing that I kind of learned about that is that the funny thing about that kind of pursuit of management is that it tends to be kind of linked with the idea of sort of having some degree of autonomy and maybe having some kind of degree of power over the things that you do. And actually those things, whilst you are kind of gifted those in the management roles in some ways, it's not the only way to kind of get them. And that actually really autonomy comes really from the respect that other people kind of have for you. And if you add value to a company, then you tend to get given autonomy. And this sort of, certainly the idea of power, which is really kind of influence, that comes really from people respecting you. So these two things aren't really linked, and it's very possible to have a successful career in both the kind of management track. It's very possible to have a career in a pure tech track, and it's also possible to sit in between. And I think I've probably, over my career, sort of done various different roles which have kind of spanned different pieces in between, or actually right the way across that spectrum. But so I think the tagline would be, don't feel that to progress, you have to be a manager.
I totally agree with you. I think there are two potential routes you can take. I think one is the management route, which, as you say, is a pretty much a traditional path. But I think also, particularly in an industry like IT, there's that ability for you to develop your career in a specialist area, and not necessarily being the only thing you do, but it is your specialism.
Yeah.
Ben, can you maybe tell us about your worst IT career moment and what you learned from that experience?
There's probably a few of these, but I think the one that kind of probably resonated with me the most was the first job I took, which was back in 1999, was in an investment bank. I ended up working for this guy who was quite hard to work for, let's put it that way.
Right.
I think he had he took the world quite seriously. This was okay. We kind of had a rapport and kind of got on. But I remember when I finally left, I went in and asked this chap. I think I updated him on something, and he just kind of completely flipped, and it's what I refer to as basically hair drying me. And he kind of just like shouted at the top of his head in the middle of an open plan office, and I just literally given him some little update, or it was some innocuous thing. And I kind of went back to my desk and I kind of sat there, and I remember looking at my hands and they were shaking, and I was like, okay, yeah, there's something that's not kind of right here. And since then, I basically had a rule, which is that I don't work for anyone that I don't like. And I think since then, I've briefly had that problem again, and I kind of got myself out of that situation pretty quickly.
Yep.
Those sort of things really affect your life. Probably nothing affects your life more than actually the relationship that you have with your colleagues and your boss. So that's definitely worth investing in. And if it's not right, just cut it early.
Yep. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a very enjoyable experience at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to repeat it particularly, but it happens.
Okay, so moving away from your worst moment, can you maybe tell us about your IT career highlight?
For me, it's kind of torn between a few different areas, but I'll kind of go with the. I think I'll actually probably go with forming this. I formed this team at RBS, which built this data platform, and this was probably a career highlight for me because I've actually kind of been. It was a mission, basically. That's what made it a real highlight. It was kind of this was shortly after the financial crash. The bank was not in a great way, and it was attempting to find ways to increase the efficiency of its technology function. And the project was really around kind of joining together the data in all of these different areas of the bank and kind of building a platform around it, a kind of microservices, or would now be called microservices platform around it that was going to reduce costs. And this problem actually of sharing data between different applications in a company is something that I actually think we don't do that well. Even today, we don't do that well. Well, certainly there's a lot more that we could do, although we're better than we used to be. But yeah, that sort of getting an opportunity to kind of have a crack at that challenge and then putting together a team and a really interesting piece of technology, that was probably my career highlight. That was a very enjoyable experience. It sort of it was very productive. There was a lot of innovation going on. We were sort of pushing papers and that kind of thing. So that was definitely my main career highlight. Although I have to say it's a tough one. So I'll just going to throw in a couple of little ones, which I think just I won't tell stories about. But I think actually the first time I pair programmed with somebody who was really good at pair programming, that was a career highlight. I think that's quite a unique experience, and I think not enough people have experienced that, or even actually seeing a sort of highly productive team, one that kind of has a real buzz. That's a great feeling.
So, Ben, what excites you about the future of the IT industry and careers in IT?
It seems pretty obvious that, software is eating the world. And, if you work in IT, you're kind of at the heart of that. And I think we know, I've got a 1-year-old daughter, and the future for her is going to look very different to the future that we've been through so far. And that's going to, it's just, I guess, exciting to be at the heart of that. And I kind of have this one mission, which is really pretty much stemmed from that project that I talked about before, which is that this sort of confluence of data and companies and applications coming together, and the technology that brings those together has really changed a lot, particularly in the last decade. That's, for me, is actually really interesting. So, when I started my career, basically people kind of just built applications with a database, and they would occasionally talk to some other application, but it was something of a kind of afterthought. Whereas today we're able to build these kind of much more integrated systems which work on much larger data sets. We have this whole field of heavyweight data technologies and streaming technologies, which allow many different applications to coordinate in a way that really wasn't possible before. And we're kind of getting a whole reinvention of a lot of kind of old ideas munged in with new ideas, event-driven architectures, and you've got kind of the whole reactive thing going on, and stream processing and machine learning and all of these things kind of coming together. I mean, I find that really exciting. That's kind of what literally keeps me awake at night.
Hopefully positively, anyway.
Yes, in a good way. Yes, very much in a good way.
Okay, we're going to move into the reveal round now. You ready for this?
Sure.
Okay. So what first attracted you to a career in IT?
Yeah, I've got a really bad answer to this, which is it's actually money, which is a bit sad, I'm sorry to say. But I was a physicist, and actually being a physicist is really also quite fun, but the pay's kind of terrible. So I always enjoy programming, so I kind of moved into IT really for originally just to try and pay off my student loans. And so that's not the best answer, but it's a truthful one.
Fair enough. What is the best career advice you've ever received?
It was actually about dealing with kind of difficult situations. And this may be kind of obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me at the time. And the advice was basically that when you get in a difficult situation, the sort of very simple formula, which is that you stick exclusively to facts and you basically remove all the emotion. And the best way to sort of implement this is in an email. So like, I don't know, you're in some kind of like slightly sticky or confrontational situation with someone, and you basically write an email, and then you just look at the email and you just literally just work out what is the minimum facts that you need to say, and then you just like remove all of any emotional content, any emotional word whatsoever, and communicate that way, and you kind of let the whole sort of situation diffuse.
Yes.
And that's quite easy to practice in email. If to do it in person actually takes a bit of skill. It took me a while to kind of get better at that. But actually that skill is really important, I think. As you go in your career, I mean, some people just do this stuff naturally, but for most of us that don't, I think you kind of actually have to sort of learn these things.
Yep.
Yeah, that was probably the one that I found most useful.
If you were to begin your IT career again right now, what would you do?
I would go and work at Thoughtworks from the start, or some other. I don't know what Thoughtworks is like these days, but I would work at a company where smart technology people go or want to work, and where they practice pair programming. And the reason for that is that you just learn in a completely different way when you pair with people. You learn their little idiosyncrasies, you learn little tricks that they have. And actually, I think this is one of the things that's quite different working in kind of Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley is very good at, like, people in Silicon Valley are very, very good at kind of computer science problems, kind of what they're trained for. They're not always so good at the software engineering side, which is actually much more kind of procedural. It's much more about kind of learning practices and learning how to like structure things, and there's like more design in there. So it's much harder to kind of understand, sort of to learn from a book. And pairing is, so I think the ideal career is basically learn computer science, because you're going to have to learn all that stuff at some point. It's easier if you get taught it as your degree. I can testify to that. And then, yes, go somewhere where you can really have a sort of formative experience to learn software engineering techniques, which are, you kind of have to learn from other people or through experimentation yourself. But it's a lot easier if you kind of pair with people who know what they're doing and been doing it for 20 years. So I would definitely do that.
What career objectives are you currently focusing on?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like I'm saying the same thing again. I still pretty much work on this kind of one problem. So although I do a lot of stuff on streaming, one of the main reasons that I'm Confluent is because of this sort of problem of trying to move data between different applications and finding a better way for that to actually work. Not so much in a static sense, but as like an organization evolves. And Kafka is a really good way of doing that. Streaming is a really good way of doing that. I actually don't think we're there yet. Like, I tried a database to solve that problem, like a big distributed database, like custom built one, and we've been doing this with a distributed log, which is a bit like a database but crossed with a messaging system. It's sort of more messaging system than database, and I'm very much interested in seeing this sort of the progression of that, particularly as to data sets grow in size and velocity and all that sort of stuff, but particularly around this problem of how different teams and different applications can collaborate.
And what's the number one non-technical skill that has helped you in your career so far?
There's this concept called the fundamental attribution error. I always end up thinking about this a lot. So this is sort of like this, it's like this thing where you're like, imagine you're like driving down the road and someone kind of pulls out in front of you and you sort of like think to yourself, you're a terrible driver or whatever. But actually, there's a good chance that were a terrible driver because they're dashing to the hospital because their daughter's being born or whatever it might be. And we as humans are really bad at kind of explaining this. We tend to sort of pick the most obvious answer to somebody else's reaction to something, and we tend to often kind of like assume it has something to do with us. And when there's actually like many, many other plausible explanations. And certainly I think there's a skill. I don't know if it's really a skill, but certainly I think there's a type of skill which is literally just to sort of go through life and try and see all of the other reasons why people do the things that they do. And I think that kind of makes you, on the most part, slightly more balanced maybe, and certainly a little bit happier.
Ben, can you share a parting piece of career advice with the IT Career Energizer audience?
It's really just this idea of motivation and the fact that motivation is actually probably your most precious commodity. It depends kind of how your brain works a little bit, but what I tend to find is that you are motivated, or I am motivated to do something at some point in time, and that motivation won't actually last. So when you do feel yourself like motivated to do something productive, make use of that at that point in time. Like try and like capitalize on that. And that's how you kind of, most of the things that you do that are significant actually come from kind of realizing that you have a sort of innate desire to do something and then kind of following through on that. One of the other things about getting slightly older is that you sort of realize that as you get older, you kind of make a trade where you trade the sort of energy of youth or maybe the motivation of youth for a degree of experience. And there's actually this kind of constant trade-off where it's sort of a zero-sum game. So yeah, when you're motivated, make use of it.
And finally, what's the best way we can find out more about you and potentially connect with you?
Yeah, sure. I'm Ben Stopford on LinkedIn. I have a website, benstopford.com. I actually once wrote a post a while back on this kind of thing, if you're interested and that sort of stuff. And I also write a bit on the Confluent blog if you have any interest in stream processing or event-driven applications and that kind of thing. And I actually also have a book coming out. It's called Designing Event-Driven Systems, which comes out in about 3 weeks.
Right. Okay. So by the time this goes out, that should be available to buy.
Yeah, it's actually an ebook, so it's free, but it's like a proper O'Reilly book.
Right. Okay. Cool. Ben, thank you so much for joining me in the IT Career Energizer podcast today. It's been great chatting with you.
Cool. Thanks, Phil.
My thanks to Ben for being my guest on today's show. You can find full show notes on the website at itcareerenergizer.com/E69. In next week's episode, I'll be talking with Dylan Beattie, a software architect, conference speaker, and musician. Thanks again for listening, and remember, if you're not growing your career, you're slowing your career. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the IT Career Energizer podcast. To find out more about building a successful career in IT, visit itcareerenergizer.com.